Welcome to Forgotten Realms, where ancient whispers echo through time, and lost memories drift between dream and myth. Here, you will not simply fall asleep. You will wander sacred ruins buried by silence, and unravel stories that history chose to forget. Close your eyes, take a breath, and let the past dream through you. This is Forgotten Realms. Sleep well. The temple beneath the breath of dust, the sun did not rise in Eridu, it clawed its way into the sky, a molten fist tearing through the haze of dawn. The city, or what remained of it, lay sprawled across the cracked earth like the bones of a beast, too vast to bury. Once Eridu had been the cradle of gods, its canals veins of sweet water pulsing through a land kissed by rivers. Now, the rivers were ghosts, their beds choked with salt and sorrow. The marshes had withered to dust, and the city's ziggurats, once proud, slumped into the earth like old men too weary to stand. No maps remembered Eridu, no roads led to its ruins. It was a place the world had agreed to forget. At the heart of this desolation stood the temple of Lama, the house of radiant breath, half sunk in dunes, its mud-brick walls crumbled under the weight of centuries. Sand had claimed its courtyards, spilling through broken arches like an uninvited guest. The air around it shimmered, not with heat, but with something heavier, stillness that pressed against the skin, as if the temple exhaled silence. No birds wheeled above its spires. No winds stirred the dust that cloaked its stones. The world held its breath here, and even the shadows seemed to hesitate before falling. Imalama was not abandoned, not entirely. The locals, nomads who grazed their gaunt herds on the sparse grasses at the desert's edge, spoke of it in murmurs, their voices low, as if afraid the temple might overhear. They called it the place where the gods stopped listening. They did not approach it, not even to salvage the clay shards or lapis beads that sometimes glinted in the sand. They said the temple was alive in its way, not with footsteps or voices, but with something older, something that watched from the dark of its inner sanctum. They said it dreamed. The legend of Samuenlil was older than the dunes, older than the salt that crusted the earth. He had been a priest of Enki, god of wisdom and waters, in the days when Eridu still sang with reeds and river hymns. Was no ordinary man, the nomad said. His eyes were the color of lapis, his voice a chant that could coax rain from a cloudless sky. He tended the temple's rites with a fervor that bordered on madness, offering barley and incense to gods who no longer answered. The other priests whispered that he saw too much, that he read the stars not as omens but as letters in a script no one else could decipher. One night, under a moon the color of bone, Samuenlil entered the inner sanctum of Imalama alone. The sanctum was a chamber carved deep into the earth, its walls lined with cuneiform so dense it seemed to writhe in the torchlight. No one knew what rites he performed there, what prayers he offered, or what he sought in the dark. He did not emerge at dawn, nor the next, nor the next. The other priests, fearful, searched the sanctum but found no trace of him, no body, no blood, no echo of his passing. Only his staff, carved with spirals like the coils of a serpent, lay abandoned on the floor. The nomads did not believe he died. He did not perish, an old woman told her grandchildren, her voice brittle as dry reeds. He lay down in the dark and began to dream. They said his dreams were so vast, so heavy, that they sank into the stones of Imalama, seeping into the cracks like water into parched earth. They said the temple dreamed with him. its walls humming with visions no mortal could bear. Years later, clay tablets began to appear, not in the temple, but scattered across the desert, half buried in dunes, wedged in the roots of dead tamarisk trees, or clutched in the hands of travelers who swore they had not carried them. The tablets were small, no larger than a man's palm, their surfaces etched with cuneiform. But it was not the cuneiform of priests or scribes. The wedges were twisted, inverted, as if written by a hand that did not know the shape of the world. Scholars who glimpsed them spoke of unknown dialects, of words that slipped from the mind like water through fingers. One tablet, found by a goatherd, bore a single phrase: "The stars are not above." The goatherd burned it, fearing it would curse. His flock, the desert around Imalama, was a sea of sand, its waves frozen in mid-crest. The heat was a living thing, coiling around the throat, thickening the air until each breath felt like swallowing ash. The horizon shimmered, not with water, but with lies mirages that painted rivers where none flowed, cities where only dust reigned. A traveler, if one were foolish enough to come, might see a ziggurat rise from the sand, its steps gleaming like polished bone, only to dissolve when approached, or a figure robed in white, walking backward across the dunes, leaving no footprints. The desert played tricks, and Imelama was its heart at noon. When the sun burned white and the shadows vanished, the temple seemed to hum. Not a sound, but a feeling, a vibration in the bones, like the distant pulse of a drum. The dunes around, it shifted, slow as breath, forming patterns that no wind could carve. Spirals, eyes, hands, with too many fingers. The nomads said these were the temple's dreams, spilling into the world like ink from a cracked jar. They said to walk those patterns was to lose yourself, not to the desert, but to something deeper, something that waited in the dark. Time, too, was unsteady here. A man might sit in the shade of a broken wall, only to find hours had passed when he thought it minutes. Or he might walk toward the temple, its spire sharp against the sky, and find it no closer after hours of trudging. Once, a child swore she saw a bird, a heron, white, a salt flying backward, its wings beating against the flow of the wind. Her mother hushed her, but the nomads nodded. They had seen such things before. The temple's entrance was a moor, its lintel cracked and sagging like a weary jaw. Beyond it, the air grew cooler, heavier, as if the earth itself exhaled. The outer courtyard was a ruin, its altars toppled, their surfaces stained with the memory of offerings, barley, oil, the blood of lambs. Lizards skittered across the stones, their scales catching the light like chips of mica. The wind, when it dared to enter, carried the faint scent of myrrh, though no incense had burned here in centuries. Deeper within, the corridors narrowed, their walls slick with damp despite the desert's thirst. The cuneiform here was older, its wedges sharp and deliberate, as if carved by a hand that knew the weight of each mark. Torchlight, if one carried a torch, flickered oddly, casting shadows that moved when they should not. A man might see his own silhouette stretch and twist, its edges fraying into shapes that were not his own. A horned head, a hand with claws, a figure that walked when he stood still. The inner sanctum was a chamber of black basalt, its walls polished to a sheen that reflected nothing. The air here was thick, pressing against the chest like a held breath. At its center was a stone slab, smooth and unadorned, large enough for a man to lie upon. The nomads said this was where Sumo-Enlil had vanished. They said if you lay upon it, you could hear his dreams, whispers of stars, of waters that flowed. upward, of gods who wept for a world they could not save. But no one had dared to try. Not in living memory. The nomads told other stories, too, around their fires at night. They spoke of a woman who wandered too close to Emalama and returned, with her shadow missing, though she cast one in every other place. They spoke of a goatherd who found a tablet and read it aloud, only to wake the next morning with his tongue turned to clay. They spoke of nights when the stars above the temple seemed to shift, forming constellations no one recognized there, light dimming as if afraid to linger. Yet the strangest tale was of the chance. On certain nights, when the moon was a sickle and the air was still, faint voices rose from the temple, not the clear hymns of priests, but something broken, fragmented, like a song heard through water. The words were unintelligible, their cadence uneven, rising and falling like the breath of a sleeper. The nomads said it was Samuenlil, still dreaming, his voice caught in the stones. They said the chants were not meant for the living, but for something else, something that listened in the dark. Where no light reached, the desert stretched on, endless and unyielding, its sands swallowing the past. Eridu was a name no one spoke. Outside the nomad camps, a city erased by time and salt. Yet Emalama stood, defiant, its stones holding secrets no one dared to claim. The mirages danced, the bird flew backward, and the dunes whispered patterns no one could read. Somewhere, in the black heart of the temple, Samuenlil dreamed, and the world trembled at the edge of his visions. The nomads watched from a distance, their eyes wary, their hands clutching amulets of bone and lapis. They did not pray to the gods of Eridu anymore. They prayed to be forgotten, to pass unnoticed by whatever stirred in the house of radiant breath. For in Emalama, the line between waking and dreaming was thin, and to cross it was to risk never returning. The stones that bled ink the desert exhaled dust, a dry sigh that swirled around Iltani's robes as she stood at the edge of Eridu's ruins. She was a scholar from Babylon, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp as obsidian despite the years etched into her face. Her satchel, heavy with clay tablets and red stili, hung at her side, a familiar weight. She had walked for weeks, guided not by maps, for none marked this forsaken place, but by dreams. They came to her unbidden, night after night, a cascade of symbols, wedges and curls, sharp as thorns, glowing against a sky of endless black. She had seen them before, in fragments, on crumbling tablets in Babylon's archives. The script of Samuenlil, the priest who vanished into the temple of Emalama, swallowed by his own dreams. Iltani's dreams were not gentle. They clawed at her, pulling her from sleep with the taste of salt and the echo of a voice she could not name. The symbols burned in her mind, twisting, alive, as if trying to speak. She had copied them onto clay, her hands trembling, only to find they matched no known tongue, not Akkadian, not Sumerian, not even the forgotten dialects of the marsh dwellers. Yet they called to her, a summons she could not refuse. So she left Babylon, its cigarettes and bustling markets fading behind her, and followed the pull of the desert to Eridu, to the house of radiant breath. The temple loomed before her, its mud-brick spires jagged against the bruised sky. Dusk settled, heavy and silent, the air thick with the scent of baked earth. Iltani clutched a pendant at her throat, a sigil of lapis, carved with a spiral that mirrored the patterns in her dreams. As the last light bled from the horizon, the sigil grew warm, then glowed, a faint pulse of blue that lit her path. She stepped forward, her sandals crunching on salt-crusted sand, and crossed the threshold of Imalama. The outer courtyard was a graveyard of altars, their stones cracked, stained with the ghosts of offerings. The air was cool, unnaturally so, pressing against her skin like damp cloth. She moved deeper, her torch casting flickering shadows that danced across walls carved with cuneiform. The wedges seemed to shift in the light, curling like tendrils of smoke, as if the stone itself breathed. Iltini's breath caught. She had read of such things in ancient text temples that lived, that watched, but she had thought them metaphors, the exaggerations of poets. Now, standing in the dark, she was not so sure. The corridors narrowed, their walls slick with moisture that should not exist in this parched land. Her torchlight caught the glint of something, a statue, half buried in shadow, its features worn but unmistakably human. Its eyes, carved from obsidian, seemed to follow her. As she passed, a whisper brushed her ear, too faint to decipher, like a word spoken underwater. She froze, her heart a drum in her chest, but the sound did not come again. Only the silence, heavy and expectant, remained. Deeper in the temple, Iltini found a chamber with a pool at its center, its surface black as polished basalt. She approached, expecting to see her reflection, but the water showed another face, a man's, with lapis eyes and a mouth curved in a half-smile, as if he knew her. Samuenalil. She stumbled back, her torch nearly slipping from her hand. The face vanished, replaced by ripples that spread without cause, as if the pool had stirred itself. She turned away, her gaze falling on a stone tablet embedded in the wall. Its surface was smooth, polished to a sheen, and covered in cuneiform. Unlike any she had seen, the wedges were sharp, deliberate, but they moved, rearranging themselves when she blinked, forming new patterns, new words. She reached out, her fingers hovering above the stone, and felt a pulse like a heartbeat. The script seemed to hum, a low vibration that thrummed in her bones. She began to read, her lips moving silently, and the words came not as sound but as images, flooding her mind with visions she could not explain. She saw a city, its towers of lapis and gold rising from a sea of reeds, its canals alive with fish and lotus. Priests chanted, their voices weaving hymns to gods whose names she did not know. Then the waters rose, black and churning, swallowing the city whole. She saw deities vast, formless, their eyes like stars turning away, their faces heavy with grief. She saw a man, Samuendlil, kneeling in a chamber much like this one, his hands pressed to a tablet, his eyes wide with terror and wonder. The visions were not hers, yet they felt like memories, as vivid as her own childhood in Babylon's dusty streets. Iltini read on, the tablet's script shifting faster now, as if eager to be known. Each word pulled her deeper, threading her thoughts with those of another. She saw deserts bloom with rivers, then dry to bone. She saw stars fall, their light pooling like blood on the earth. She saw Samuenlil lying on a stone slab, his body still but his mind ablaze, dreaming a world that was not this one. The visions were a tide, pulling her under, and she did not resist. She welcomed them, her scholar's hunger outweighing her fear. The air grew heavier, the walls closer, as if the temple itself were closing around her. The whispers returned, louder now, a chorus of voices that spoke in the lost tongue of her dreams. They were not kind, nor cruel, just ancient, heavy with the weight of forgotten things. Iltini's sigil burned against her chest, its light pulsing in time with her heart. She moved to another tablet, then another, each one alive with script that bled ink into her mind. The words were a curse. She knew a tether to Samoinla's endless dream. To read them was to join him, to surrender to the visions that had claimed him. She did not stop. She traced the wedges with her fingers, her voice a murmur as she spoke the words aloud. The chamber seemed to tilt, the pool rippling with images of sunken cities, of gods who wept, of a man who dreamed and did not wake. Iltani's own memories began to blurt her studies in Babylon. The scent of her mother's bread, the laughter of her brother fading like ink in water. In their place came the dreamer's life, his prayers, his fears, his nights spent staring at stars that were not above. The temple was alive now, its walls pulsing, its statues turning their heads to watch. The pool reflected not just Samoenla, but 1,000 faces, 1,000 lives, all caught in the same dream. Iltani felt herself slipping, her body heavy, her mind a tapestry woven with threads not her own. Yet she smiled, her lips dry, her eyes bright. She had come seeking knowledge, and here it was not in clay or stone, but in the living dream of a man who had become more than a man. She lay down on the stone slab at the chamber's heart, the same slab where Samoenlil had vanished. The sigil at her throat glowed brighter, its light spilling across the basalt, illuminating the cuneiform that writhed like serpents. The whispers grew to a chant, a hymn that was both lament and summons. Iltani closed her eyes, and the visions came faster: cities, stars, gods, all spiraling into a single point of light. She did not fear the curse. She welcomed it, for in it was truth, vast and terrible, a truth no scholar in Babylon could ever know. The temple of Imalama exhaled, its breath a sigh that echoed through the desert. Iltani dreamed, and the stones bled ink. Chapter 3. Iltani's eyes opened, but the world was not the temple's black basalt chamber. The air was thick, sweet with the scent of overripe figs and the faint tang of copper. She stood on a street of polished obsidian, its surface reflecting a sky that was no sky swirling, with stars that pulsed like heartbeats, their light weaving patterns that hurt to look at too long. Around her rose a city, but not Eridu, not Babylon, not any place carved by human hands. Its walls were built of hieroglyphs, cuneiform wedges stacked into towers that shimmered and shifted, as if the words themselves were alive, rewriting themselves with every glance. The ground beneath her feet was sand, but it sang a low, mournful hum that vibrated in her chest, each grain glinting like shattered glass. This was Samoenlil's dream, and she was inside it. The city stretched endlessly, its streets curving, like the coils of a serpent, leading nowhere and everywhere. Canals of liquid obsidian flowed beside the paths, their surfaces rippling with faces that flickered and vanished: men, women, gods, their eyes wide with longing or fear. Iltani walked, her sandals leaving no mark on the sand, her shadow trailing behind her like a reluctant child. The air was warm, heavy, as if the city itself exhaled. She passed arches carved with scenes of forgotten rites priests offering, bowls of starlight, deities with faces of smoke, rivers that flowed upward into the sky. The hieroglyphs on the walls whispered as she passed, their voices a chorus of fragments, half-remembered prayers in a tongue she almost knew. Her memories of Babylon, clay tablets, of the scent of her mother's bread, of the weight of her satchel began to fray. They slipped from her like water through cupped hands, replaced by visions that felt older, deeper, as if they had always been hers. She saw herself kneeling in a temple, her hands pressed to a tablet that burned with light. She saw herself chanting under a moon that bled red. Her voice not her own, but his Simoenlil's. The dream was not a place, she realized. It was a mind, vast and labyrinthian, and she was no longer sure where she ended and it began. At the city's heart stood a fig tree, its branches heavy with fruit that glistened like amber. Honey dripped from its leaves, pooling on the ground in golden rivulets that smelled of myrrh and ash. Beneath the tree sat a figure, half-formed, as if sculpted from clay not yet fired. His eyes were stone, lapis blue but lifeless, staring at a horizon that did not exist. His robes were woven of shadow, fraying at the edges, and his hands rested on his knees, fingers curled like roots. Samawenlil, the dreamer, asleep yet not asleep, his breath a slow rhythm that matched the pulse. Of the city, Iltani approached, her heart a drum in her chest. The sand beneath her feet sang louder, its notes sharp and discordant, like a warning. She knelt before him, her sigil pendant glowing faintly, its spiral mirroring the patterns in the air. "Who are you?" she asked, though she knew the answer. The dreamer's lips moved, but his voice was not a sound. It was a feeling, a weight that pressed against her mind. "You are me. I am yet dreaming you." The words were a riddle, curling like smoke, their meaning slipping away even as she grasped. For it, she reached out, her fingers brushing his hand, and found it cold, unyielding, like polished stone. Yet his eyes flickered, a spark of light deep within, and the city trembled, its towers swaying as if caught in a wind. The city was not empty. Shapes moved in the shadows, creatures that were neither beast nor man. A lion with the wings of a vulture stalked the streets, its eyes burning with amber light, its roar a chant of forgotten contracts with gods whose names had been erased. A figure with the body of a man but the head of a jackal stood at the entrance to a temple, its walls carved with stars that wept. It spoke in a voice like breaking glass, reciting laws older than the earth. The river owes the sky its water. The sky owes the earth its tears. Iltani listened, her mind straining to hold the words, but they dissolved, leaving only echoes. These were the guardians of the dream. She realized fragments of Samawendla's mind given form to protect. The temples of his thoughts. They did not threaten her, but their presence was a weight, a reminder that this world was not hers to claim. Yet with each step deeper into the city, she felt lighter, unburdened. Her memories of the waking world, her studies, her home, her name faded further, like stars at dawn. In their place grew a strange peace, a certainty that this dream was more real, more true than the desert she had left behind. She wandered deeper, the city shifting round her. Streets dissolved and reformed, leading her to plazas where statues of gods stood with faces turned inward as if ashamed. She passed a fountain that sprayed not water but light, its beams weaving tapestries of battles and births, loves and betrayals, all lost to time. The hieroglyphs on the walls grew more frantic, their wedges twisting into shapes that were not letters but eyes, hands, mouths, all watching, reaching, speaking. She read them, though she did not understand how, and each word pulled her further into the dreamer's mind. She saw his life now, not as visions but as her own. She was Samawenalil, kneeling in Imalema's sanctum, his fingers tracing cuneiform that burned with secrets. She was Samawenlil, staring at stars that whispered truths no priest could bear. She was Samawenlil, lying on the stone slab, his body sinking into the dream as the temple closed around him. The city was his mind, its towers his thoughts, its rivers his fears, its creatures his doubts. And she was part of it, woven into the dream like a thread in a loom. Tani returned to the fig tree, the dreamer still seated, unchanged. The honey at his feet had thickened, clotting like blood. She knelt again, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with something deeper longing she could not name. "What do you want of me?" she asked. His stone eyes flickered again, and his voice was a tide, pulling her under. To dream is to become. To wake is to forget. The words were a blade, cutting away the last of her memories. She saw Babylon's walls crumble, her brother's face dissolve, her own name scatter like ash. Yet she was not afraid. The dream was vast, eternal, a world where cities floated on rivers of obsidian, where sand sang, where gods wept and stars bled. It was more real than the desert, more real than her flesh. A tear fell from her eye, shimmering as it caught the light of the pulsing stars. It struck the dreamer's foot and turned to gold, a single bead that glowed like a sun. The city shuddered, its hieroglyphs flaring bright, then dimming. The creatures paused, their chants falling silent. The dreamer's lips curved, almost a smile, and the sand beneath him sang a single, piercing note. Iltani lay down beside him, her body sinking into the warm earth. The fig tree dripped honey, its scent wrapping around her like a shroud. She closed her eyes, and the city folded inward, its towers collapsing into light, its rivers flowing into her veins. She was Iltani, and she was Samuenlil, and she was the dream itself. The waking world was a shadow, a lie told by the sun. Here, in the dreamer's mind, she was whole. The city sang, and Iltani dreamed. The dream began to loop, as dreams sometimes do when they grow heavy with purpose. Iltani stood again in the shadowed heart of the temple, the air thick with cedar smoke and the faint hum of unseen voices. The braziers burned low, their embers pulsing like the heartbeat of a god long forgotten. She knew this moment, she had lived it before, moments ago, or perhaps centuries. The clay tablets on the altar gleamed under torchlight, their cuneiform sharp and unfamiliar, yet she felt their weight in her hands as if she had inscribed them herself. But something was different. The tablets' edges were softer now, their corners rounded like river stones. She traced a symbol with her finger, and it shifted, curling into a new shape, a spiral, endless, devouring its own tail. She stepped back, her breath catching. The stars visible through the temple's high window had rearranged themselves. No longer the constellations of Sumar-Dumuzi's plough in Anna's crown, they formed a jagged, unfamiliar pattern, like a wound torn across the sky. The shadows whispered. Not words, not yet, but a chorus of half-formed thoughts, slithering along the walls. Stay, see, remember. Iltani's heart thudded, her priestess's robes clinging to her skin as if soaked in dew. She turned to the doorway, expecting the courtyard beyond, but found only a staircase spiraling upward into darkness. It had not been there before. She was reliving the evening, but it was not the same evening. The dream was reshaping itself, and she was caught in its current. The loop began again. Iltani stood in the temple, the braziers flickering, the tablets gleaming. This time, the cuneiform pulsed faintly, as if alive, and the air carried a metallic temps, like blood spilled on sacred ground. She approached the altar, her steps echoing too loudly, and noticed a shadow cast across the tablets, one that did not match her own. It was taller, sharper, its edges frayed like tattered linen. She spun, but no one stood behind her. The whispers grew clearer. Asterisk, you are the vessel. You are the key. Asterisk, she pressed her hands to her ears, but the voices were inside her, threading through her thoughts like reeds woven into a basket. The stars outside shifted again, their new pattern tighter, more deliberater, cage of light. She felt the dream pulling at her, urging her to stay, to sink into its rhythm, to forget there was anything beyond this temple, this moment. She ran to the doorway, her bare feet slapping against the cool stone. The staircase was there again, its steps carved with symbols she could not read. She hesitated, her hand on the wall. The stone was warm, pulsing faintly, as if the temple itself were alive. She climbed one step, then another, and the whispers faded, but behind her, the temple did not vanish, waited, patient as a predator. The third loop was crueler. The tablets were gone, replaced by a pool of black water on the altar, its surface rippling without wind. Iltini's reflection stared back, but her eyes were wrong pupils, slit like a serpent's, glowing faintly gold. She stumbled back, knocking over a brazier. Embers scattered, igniting the hem of her robe, but the flames did not burn. They crawled upward, cool and alive, weaving patterns across the fabric stars, spirals, a door. The whispers were words now, sharp and insistent. Asterisk, the curse is not yours to bear. It is yours to choose. Asterisk, she clutched her head, the voices overlapping, a cacophony of priests, gods, and something older, deeper, buried beneath the temple's foundations. Asterisk, he sleeps. He must not wake. You are the dream that binds him. Asterisk, knees buckled. She knelt before the altar, the black water still rippling, her reflection now gone. The truth clawed its way into her mind, raw and unrelenting. The curse was not a punishment, as she had feared. It was a preservation, a delicate, eternal trap. Her mind, caught in this dream, was kept awake, alive, to hold back a forgotten god sealed beneath the temple. A god whose name had been erased from every tablet, every hymn, yet whose hunger lingered in the earth. If she surrendered to the dream, she would dissolve into it, herself fading into the temple's endless evening, her memories fueling the curse's fire. She would cease to be Iltani, becoming only the dreamer, eternal and empty. But if she broke the curse, if she woke, the god would stir, the earth would crack, the stars would fall, and the world would drown in his awakening. She rose, trembling, and faced the staircase. It was taller now, its steps stretching into the void where the temple's roof should have been. The stars above were no longer caged, they beckoned, their light cold and sacred. She took the first step, and the temple shivered behind her. Each step was a memory. Iltini climbed, and her past unfolded like a scroll unrolled by unseen hands. The first step was her childhood, running through the reed marshes with her brother, their laughter swallowed by the river's hum. The second was her initiation as a priestess, the cold oil anointing her brow, the weight of Inanna's gaze in the statue's lapis eyes. The third was her first vision, a dream of fire raining from the sky, her screams unheard by the sleeping city. With each step, the memory burned away, leaving only ash in her mind. She wept, but her tears dried before they fell. The staircase spiraled higher, the temple now a distant speck below, its braziers mere pinpricks of light. The whispers followed her, softer now, almost pleading. Asterisk, stay. You are enough. The world is not. Asterisk, she climbed, and her memories dwindled. Her mother's voice, singing lullabies under a crescent moon gone. Her first love, a scribe with ink-stained fingers, his shy smile gone, the taste of barley bread, the scent of myrrh, the feel of clay beneath her stylus all gone. By the 100th step, she was no longer sure who she was. Only the dream remained, and the choice it demanded. The staircase ended at a platform of polished obsidian, floating among the stars. Before her stood a door, its surface smooth and black, absorbing all light. No handle, no hinges, only silence radiating from it, like heat from a dying fire. The whispers were gone. The temple was gone. There was only Iltani, the door, and the infinite void. She pressed her hand to the door. It was cold, unyielding, yet she felt a presence beyond it, not a god, not a person, but something vast and quiet. The dreamer's final secret, the truth the curse had guarded for millennia. Her hand trembled. To open the door was to choose the dream's eternal prison or the god's awakening. To stay was to lose herself. To leave was to risk the world. She closed her eyes, searching for a memory to anchor her, but found none. She was empty, a vessel carved by the dream's relentless tide. Yet in that emptiness, she found clarity. The curse had not chosen her, she had chosen it long ago, in a life she could no longer recall. She had offered herself to bind the god, to weave the dream that held him. And now she could choose again. Iltani opened the door. There was only sand, infinite, quiet, sacred. It stretched in every direction, a sea of gold under a sky without stars. The door was gone. The staircase vanished. Iltani stood alone, her feet sinking into the warm grains. The silence was absolute, not the absence of sound, but the presence of something older, deeper than sound could ever be. She walked, though there was no destination. The sand shifted beneath her, whispering without words, and she understood. The dreamer's secret was not a truth to be spoken, but a state to be entered. The god was not a being, but a hunger, a void that fed on time, on memory, on existence itself. The curse had been her shield, her sacrifice, keeping the void at bay by feeding it her mind, her dreams, herself. But now, in the sand's embrace, she saw another path. The void could not be bound forever, nor could it be unleashed. It could only be met as one meets a lover or a foe, with open eyes and steady heart. Iltani knelt, scooping sand in her hands, letting it slip through her fingers. Each grain was a moment, a life, a world. She poured herself into it, not as a sacrifice, but as a joining. The sand rose, swirling around her, a storm without wind. It filled her lungs, her eyes, her heart, yet she did not choke. She became the sand, infinite and quiet, her boundaries dissolving into its sacred flow. The void was there, waiting, but it could not consume what was already boundless. The god stirred beneath the earth, but found no dreamer to devour only sand, only silence, only Iltani, who was no longer Iltani, but something greater, something eternal. The temple stood empty, its braziers cold, its tablets crumbled to dust. The stars above were still, their patterns unchanged for the first time in millennia. The whispers had ceased, the staircase vanished. Beneath the earth, the god slept, his hunger sated not by destruction, but by absence, a dream that had become a desert, vast and sacred in the city beyond. The people woke to a dawn brighter than any they had known. They spoke of a priestess, Iltani, whose name lingered in their hymns, though none could recall her face. They carved her story into new tablets, not of clay, but of memory. And the river carried her name to the sea dot. And in the desert, the sand whispered, quiet and infinite, holding the secret of a curse that had become a choice, a dream that had become a god. Chapter 5 *. The temple exhaled, and Iltani was no longer herself. Her thoughts, once sharp as a stylus on clay, softened, seeping into the stones beneath her feet. The air was heavy with the scent of myrrh and dust, a fragrance older than memory, older than the gods whose names had been scratched from the tablets. She felt the temple's pulse, slow and deep, as if it were a living thing, its breath weaving through her own. The world slowed, time stretching thin, a thread pulled taut until it was no more than mist. She stood in the heart of the temple, or perhaps she did not stand at all. Her body felt distant, a vessel unmoored, drifting in the tide of the dream. The braziers were gone, their embers long scattered, yet a faint glow lingered, not from fire but from the stones themselves, their surfaces etched with cuneiform that shimmered like moonlight on water. The symbols moved, not as words but as currents, flowing into one another, unraveling their meanings into silence. The wind came first, ancient and unhurried, slipping through the temple's high windows. It carried the whispers of forgotten chants, hymns sung by priests whose bones had long since crumbled to sand. The wind curled around her, brushing her skin like a mother's hand, and she heard it, a lullaby without words, a melody woven from the size of ziggurats under starlight. It spoke of rivers that had carved the earth before the first city rose, of mountains that stood when the gods were young, of skies that wept for no one. Iltani closed her eyes, or perhaps they were already closed, and let the wind carry her thoughts away, scattering them like chaff in a harvest breeze. The dreamer did not speak. The dreamer had no voice, no name, only presence await in the silence, a shadow cast by no light. Iltani felt it, not as a person but as a tide, pulling her deeper into the temple's breath. The earth beneath her stirred, not with motion, but with awareness. It breathed slow and eternal, its rhythm matching the drip of water from some unseen spring. Each drop fell in perfect time, a heartbeat counted in centuries, echoing through the stone like a pulse through flesh. Crickets sang from corners she could not see, their chirps threading through the silence, not breaking it but weaving it tighter. A tapestry of sound and stillness. She moved, or the temple moved around her, and she found herself in the courtyard. Though it was no courtyard she knew. The ziggurat loomed above, its steps silvered by moonlight. Each tier a shadow stretched long and thin, like fingers reaching for the sky. The moon hung low, swollen and pale, its light spilling over the stone, pooling in the crevices where offerings had once been laid. The shadows danced, not with wind but with memory priests climbing the steps, their robes trailing like rivers. Worshippers lifting clay bowls to the heavens. A child's laughter, fleeting, lost to time. Iltani watched, or perhaps she was the watcher, herself dissolving into the stones, her breath mingling with the temple's own. The stars above did not fall, they rose, slow and deliberate, as if drawn upward by an unseen hand. They were not the stars of Sumer, not the plough of Dumuzi or the crown of Inanna, but something older, their light cold and untamed. They unraveled, their names slipping from the sky like threads from a loom, leaving only mist in their wake. Time was no longer a river, no longer a line, it was mist, curling and formless, wrapping Iltani in its embrace. She did not resist. There was no need. The dream held her, soft and sacred, and she let it. Iltini lay in the heart of the temple, though she did not remember lying down. Beside her was Samunlil, his presence as familiar as her own heartbeat, though she could not recall his face. He was not a memory but a feeling, a warmth like the sun on baked clay, a weight like a hand resting on hers. Their dreams interlaced, vines curling through sand, their roots entwined in the earth beneath the temple. She saw him, or perhaps she saw through him, his eyes like polished obsidian, his breath a rhythm that matched the earth's own. They did not speak. Words were too heavy, too sharp for this place. Instead, their thoughts flowed together, liquid and boundless, like rivers meeting at a delta. She saw his dreams, a boy carving reeds into flutes, their notes rising to the stars. A man kneeling before a statue of Nana, the moon god, his prayers swallowed by the night. A scribe etching tablets, his fingers trembling with the weight of truths he could not name. And he saw hers, a girl weaving baskets by the river, her laughter bright as bronze, a priestess standing before the altar, her visions burning like fire in her chest. A woman climbing a staircase to the stars, her memories falling away like leaves. Their dreams wove tighter, threads of light and shadow, sand and stone. There was no pain, no questions, only the slow, sacred stillness that held them both. The temple breathed around them, its stones humming with the weight of millennia, its silence a song older than the gods. Iltini felt herself dissolving, not into nothing but into everything, the temple, the wind, the moonlight, Samoenlil. She was the drip of water, the chirp of crickets, the shadow on the ziggurat steps. She was the dream, and the dream was her. The curse completed its circle, not with a sound but with a sigh, soft as the wind over the desert. It was not a chain, not a prison, but a cycle, eternal and unbroken. The god beneath the temple did not stir, for there was no god, only the void, the hunger that had been bound by Iltini's choice, her dream, her sacrifice. She had not defeated it, nor had it consumed her. She had become it, or it had become her, and in that joining, the world was spared. The temple stood, its stones worn smooth by time, its braziers cold, its tablets dust. The wind carried no chants, only the faint hum of the earth's breath. The moonlight lingered, silver and still, casting shadows that no longer danced. The stars above were nameless, their light soft as mist, and the dream continued without end. Iltini and Samoenlil lay in the heart of the temple, their forms no longer distinct, their dreams a single thread woven into the silence. The water dripped, the crickets sang, the earth breathed, and in the stillness, the sacred stretched on, infinite and quiet, a lullaby sung by the stones themselves. And so the dream remains. In a city no map recalls, where rivers once sang hymns to stars now nameless, a temple stands, or perhaps it never stood at all. Its stones are dust, its braziers cold, yet its breath lingers, woven from clay and silence. Beneath its unseen arches, two minds sleep side by side, Diltani and Samoendala. Their dreams interlaced like reeds in a basket, their selves dissolved into the earth's slow pulse. They are no longer priestess and scribe, no longer bound by names or time. They are the dream, and the dream is them, eternal and quiet. A sigh held in the heart of the desert. You have wandered with them, through the temple's shadowed halls, where cuneiform pulsed like a heartbeat and shadows whispered secrets older than the gods. You have climbed the staircase to the stars, Each step a memory burned to ash and stood before the door of silence, where sand stretched infinite and sacred. You have felt the wind of old gods, sharp with myrrh and mourning, carrying chants that crumbled long ago. You have warmed your hands at the embers of forgotten suns, their light soft as moonlight on a ziggurat steps. Their story has woven, through you, a thread of mist and clay, pulling you into the rhythm of a dream that does not end. Now let it go. Release the weight of the temple's breath, the drip of water in unseen springs, the hum of crickets in corners unlit. Let the stars fall upward, their names unraveling into mist. Let the sand settle, its grains holding the echoes of lives uncounted. The curse is complete, not as a chain but as a circle, unbroken and still. Iltani and Simonilal sleep their dreams a lullaby sung by the earth itself, and you are free to step away, to return to the world where rivers still flow and cities still rise. Yet as you go, carry this: the dream remains. In the quiet of your own heart, in the shadow of your own steps, you may hear it, the faint hum of clay, the whisper of a wind that knows no time. The temple is gone, or perhaps it was never there, but its breath lingers, sacred and silent, waiting for those who wander to listen. And so the dream remains, woven into the breath of clay, endless and eternal, beneath a sky where stars no longer need names.